Welcome to the Scam Economy with your host, Matt Bender.
Bitcoin is going green. Oh, sorry. Greenwashing. Bitcoin is going greenwashing. Right. That makes more sense. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10, the big 1-0 of Scam Economy. That's right. I am your host, Matt Binder. And on this 10th episode of Scam Economy, we will be talking about this new report that has Bitcoin fans and maxis going gaga for how Bitcoin can actually help save the Earth and avoid catastrophic climate change? What? Yeah, it involves Exxon getting into the whole Bitcoin mining business. I mean, Exxon would never lead us astray, right? So you know it's gotta be legit. And by legit, I mean a whole big marketing ploy to make it seem like they're actually doing something good for the environment.
How dare you?
But what do I know? That's why I've brought someone who covers climate change and the environment for a living. We'll get to all that and more in just a minute. But first, patreon.com/MattBinder to support this show, scameconomy.com for all the links to where you can find this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, leave a review on Spotify, follow me on Twitter at MattBinder, follow the show on Twitter at Scam Economy, youtube.com/MattBinder for the video version of the show, and of course you can join me there for the post-show hotline live stream, as well as at twitch.tv/MattBinder. But time's ticking, and I'm really interested in finding out just how Bitcoin mining is going to save life as we know it on Earth. And joining me now to discuss all of this is Leanna First-Arai, independent journalist with a focus on climate and environmental issues. Leanna, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I really appreciate being here.
Oh, I appreciate you being here because I have to say, I recently came across a story that was making the rounds. Pretty much every mainstream media outlet was covering it, and the crypto world, specifically the Bitcoin advocate world, people who love Bitcoin, invest in Bitcoin, run companies and investment firms that take or, buy up Bitcoin, they were all flaunting this story that basically makes it seem like Bitcoin has finally found a way to officially go green. And if you listen to some of these Bitcoin advocates, they were saying everything from Bitcoin is solving the climate change issue or Bitcoin's going to save the planet. And I'm looking into this story and I was doing and basically the story is about how Exxon is basically using Bitcoin mining to help lower or reduce its emissions. And I'm looking at this title, I'm thinking to myself, what? This goes against everything we know about Bitcoin, and we'll get into that in a second. But I'm reading this and I'm doing some research, and then I came across your piece that basically came out months ago, but gives the whole background to what Exxon is talking about when it comes to, what they're saying is going to lower their emissions, and that is how something to do with gas flaring. Can you explain what this is? Like, what is gas flaring? Why are they doing it? What is it? Take it away.
Yeah, for sure. Flaring is basically a safety feature that's used in all kinds of industrial purposes, but specifically and especially for the purposes of this story, in oil and gas operations, right? So flares will be on site at all kinds of oil producing sort of apparatuses and industrial facilities to basically burn off the extra gas that sort of accumulates as oil production occurs. And so basically, I mean, the sort of cut and dry of these operations is that what they're saying is that, there's all this waste gas as oil is being produced. It's just being flared or burnt off in these stacks that are really sort of colorful and a good, it's quite a good photo, right? but leads to all kinds of issues. So yeah, basically a flare is just a way of disposing of methane gas in sort of a quick combustible way.
But why do they do that?
I mean, so ultimately, it is a safety feature. First and foremost, it allows there to be. So if we're talking about sort of some of the major oil producing regions in the U.S., such as the Bakken Shale, such as which is in the Williston Basin, right, or like the Permian Basin in West Texas. As oil is being drilled from the ground, there's also this excess methane gas that's sort of bubbling isn't the right word, but it's sort of like coming to the surface, right? And that comes with it lots of pressure. So in a lot of scenarios, a flare is just a way, sort of in its most fundamental sense, is a way of combusting that gas so that it doesn't build up and create sort of explosive scenarios. That said, there's so much production happening that, flares are used sort of to dispose of gas that isn't profitable to bring to market.
So basically, what you're let me make sure I got this right, because I know this is something that I know little to nothing about. I read about gas flaring, I think, for the first time when I came across. No, well, that's not true. But the first time I really delve into it was with this story. So basically, these oil and gas companies like an Exxon, they dig right in, and this stuff, these natural resources, in this case, this methane gas, just comes flying out, and they just don't have the capacity to catch it all, so they have to burn it.
Yeah, so that's essentially it. Where it gets a little bit complicated with in terms of sort of the Bitcoin operation stuff, is the fact that so in some of these, like in the Permian, for example, or the Williston Basin that I mentioned before, in North Dakota, and Montana. So the primary fossil fuel commodity that an Exxon in this case is looking for is going to be crude oil. So that's what they're aiming for. But that's what's more profitable, right? But what also comes up as a byproduct of that is methane gas, which can be compressed and sent off site. But there's a lot of extra, right? And so for them, it's less profitable to bottle it up, so to speak, and transport it rather than just to like.
Wow. All right. So basically, it seems like, I mean, to me, it's pretty crazy that they're just wasting this. I mean, this resource that they, people talk about right now, how much gas prices are, and here we are just wasting these resources because it would be too costly for them to catch it all. Amazing. But let's now jump into the crypto part, because you mentioned in your piece is called, for people who I urge everyone to go check it out. It's in The Guardian. It's called "A False Solution?" How crypto mining became the oil industry's new hope. And in this piece, you spent time with a company who, interestingly enough, comes up in that recent article I saw from just a week or two ago. The company you spoke with is also part of that Exxon program, where they're sending this this energy, I guess, to them so they can mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, so getting a little bit more into the Bitcoin, sort of the crypto side of things, where to begin here, I guess. So yeah, the company that you're referring to and that I spent time sort of interviewing the co-founders of is Crusoe Energy. And so the reality is that this is the origin point here is that there's a big problem, right, in terms of what we're talking about here. There's a ton of gas that is being wasted. It is important to note that there is a huge problem when it comes to this wasted gas, right? When we're talking about producing in big oil fields. And so the Environmental Defense Fund says, according to their calculations based on sort of satellite imaging, the latest satellite images that they've been analyzing, something like 1.4 million metric tons of methane is emitted from the Permian Basin annually, which is the equivalent of something like 38 billion pounds of coal being burnt, or it's the equivalent of all kinds of other things, but we'll keep it simple there. It's a ton of wasted gas, right? So when I first came across this company that's now working with Exxon, which is called Crusoe Energy, I was really compelled by their commitment to, their stated commitment to solving that problem, right? Which is like environmentalists, climate folks, all kinds of people of all kinds of colors, industrial sort of operating crowd agrees on this problem, right? So I was originally really compelled by the fact that, these two co-founders of this company, Crusoe, is really, really appeared to be very genuinely concerned with this problem. So basically they set out to sort of, the two of them set out to merge some of their specialties, and they wanted to sort of solve this flaring problem, this waste gas problem, merge that with the fact that crypto, mining for crypto, all that infrastructure is, as your listeners all know, extremely, extremely energy intensive.
And I have some stats here too, because I've mentioned these before, but these to me, really, really paint like an incredible picture of just how wasteful Bitcoin mining is. And again, I like you said, I've mentioned this. This is episode 10 of this show now. I think I've mentioned this on episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Basically, a single Bitcoin transaction is equivalent basically to the amount of energy a U.S. household uses up in 2.5 months. On top of that, one Bitcoin transaction is pretty much the equivalent of around 2 million Visa transactions, to compare it to, Bitcoin advocates like to say how this is the future of payment processing and such. To give you an example of how inefficient it is just on this front. Another great stat is that when Tesla announced its $1.5 billion actually investment into Bitcoin, the carbon footprint was the equivalent to 1.8 million vehicles. Basically, I mean, the whole point of Tesla is to get less gas-guzzling cars out on the road, and here they are buying up Bitcoin that is equivalent to 1.8 million of those gas-guzzling cars put on the road. And then altogether, for a whole year, Bitcoin consumes more electricity than a country like Argentina, which is around 120 terawatt hours per year. So this is incredible and ridiculous, quite frankly. I mean, this is all so when you make a transaction, for it to be recorded on the blockchain, these miners basically have their whole setup going to work to solve these equations that basically put this transaction on the blockchain, and it gets harder and harder because that's how proof of work works, in order to reward them with Bitcoin. That's basically, in the most basic terms, what mining is. That's what all this energy is being used up for.
That's what it's being used up for. And then, on top of that, just sort of launching off of all those numbers you just shared, I mean, just the fact that energy consumption for mining Bitcoin has skyrocketed, it's increased something like 62-fold in the past, I think it's 5 or so years. So it's just kind of, it's impossible to wrap one's head around the amount, the implications there, I find.
Right. Yeah, it's just, this especially is really stunning to me that it's happening now in the year 2022, because I feel like as a whole, like the entire world actually has moved closer and closer than ever before to the realization that climate change is a catastrophic issue, the most pressing issue that the world faces. This could lead to, the change of the world as we know it for humans. And, we have an entire generation that's coming up, the, young generation from, I'm a millennial myself, but, the generations even younger than millennials, Gen Z and the generations below that really are honing in on just how important this issue is. And so much work has been done to just these slight movements from like, universities divesting in fossil fuel companies, all these sorts of things, forcing major corporations to look for greener ways to run their companies. And here we are going backwards. Not only like is blockchain and Bitcoin and crypto as a whole just getting bigger, like all these governments and major corporations whom I just mentioned were realizing how important this issue is, are now going, how do we integrate crypto and blockchain into this? Whatever it is they currently do. And it's like, what are you doing? Like all this work, all this movement towards doing something about climate change, just going to be, a wash, or even worse. We're going backwards. It's not even a wash. It's like it's getting even worse.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think I do want to note that, I mean, we're talking today, Matt, you and I, on April 4th, which is today the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released the third installment of the major report, combining the findings of over 100 scientists, right, on sort of like telling us how bad it is. And it's a hopeful report. Want to mention still sort of intervene in some of all this, but one of the main findings, right, is that, and this is no surprise, it's been said before, but that there cannot be any new fossil fuel infrastructure, and that currently planned fossil fuel infrastructure would cause the world to exceed sort of that 1.5 degree Celsius limit. So, and sort of what we're talking about with sort of the Bitcoin flaring phenomenon, that is essentially sort of throwing a lifeline to, to new fossil fuel infrastructure being built and expanded. So it's just, we're in it right now.
Right. But
deep in it.
Right, but this company you spoke with, what are they called?
They're called Crusoe, yeah,
Crusoe.
like Robinson Crusoe. Mm-hmm.
They are arguing differently. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you learned from your time speaking with them?
Sure. So yeah, the way and their argument. One of the things. Let me just preface this by saying one of the things that was really striking to me in speaking with both of them is that I genuinely believe that they believe in what they're doing. And that is, I think, one of the biggest sort of undoings that we're grappling with in this conversation, both the Bitcoin conversation and the climate conversation, right? So they believe, I believe that they believe that their intervention, which is capturing the waste gas, the methane and sort of volatile organic compounds and other sort of trace gases too, that surface when oil production happens, that they're able to, rather than have producers have to flare that off, burn it off, and not do anything with it, rather than just have that happen, they're saying that they can capture that gas. They can bring sort of a shipping container on site to these really, really remote, cold, like bone dry, cold locations where there's not infrastructure to get that gas to market. And so they're saying that rather than have that combustion process occur and have see that like dramatic flare go off so often on these sites, they can use that gas, burn it in a generator, and use that energy to power contained within these sort of shipping containers like structures, all kinds of mining operations. I think it's primarily Ethereum and Bitcoin that their operations are and will be mining.
Right. And I should add that those stats that I used for Bitcoin, that I shared for Bitcoin, are pretty much the exact same for Ethereum, because they both use the same proof of work network. They're very equivalent in how the networks run. But this is also what you just explained, how they sold their climate change fighting Bitcoin mining operation. That's basically the same as what Exxon says. I mean, Exxon is working with this company to do exactly what they just said. And, we all know that Exxon has never lied to us. I mean, when it comes to climate, for people who don't know, I'm referring to the reports that, Exxon knew about climate change something like 4 decades ago, at least, and basically hid that information from the public, or didn't share it, or did straight up undermine exactly how bad they knew it was going to be. So
yep, they've known since the 70s.
Right. And it's also important, I think, to break down some of the companies that, Crusoe has also convinced about their environmentally friendly Bitcoin mining operation, because they've raised a lot of money.
They have indeed. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess so. They've raised all kinds of capital, right? I think that uh, the list is long. I think the Winklevoss brothers are,
Yeah.
are that come to mind first and foremost. Are you familiar with any of the others? I know, I mean, that's just kind of that endorsement.
Yeah. I mean,
Is yeah.
And the
Powerful.
The Winklevoss brothers are, we should also mention, are major investors in crypto in terms of they've run their own exchange pretty much. On top of that, I have some of the other. It's a long list. They raised their most recent, or at least the most recent one I can find, was in $128 million in funding, and they received funding from everyone from Bain Capital. Everyone remember Mitt Romney? Yeah, I mean, he's a senator, but it's unbelievable. Coinbase, and the co-founder and former CTO of Tesla. I mean, again, it's so astounding to me to just see some of these, names come up. We got Exxon, who's working with them, who, like you just mentioned, they knew about climate change since the 70s. You have Tesla, in terms of, Tesla, the company, investing in Bitcoin. Elon Musk, even at first, even promoted Bitcoin as a way to pay for your new Tesla vehicle, your new electric car. And then everyone was like, every transaction that you gets made to buy your vehicle via Bitcoin is basically like, why didn't you just sell them like 1 million gas guzzlers? And then he was like, he retracted and was like, oh, let's not accept Bitcoin right now at the very least. And then you got a former co-founder and CTO of Tesla investing in this. It's like, it's so interesting to see that. I mean, at least from my personal point of view, it seems like a lot of this green initiative appears to be, marketing ploys to basically try to tamper down on these worries that, hey, this whole industry that's enriching these VCs and these venture capital firms and these tech companies and the oil and gas industry now, maybe it's not very good for the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I also think, something that that came up a lot when I was speaking with climate experts for this piece, is just the idea that, right, this is precisely what what sort of the natural order of things is, short of having comprehensive climate policy and comprehensive crypto policy sort of at the federal level, right? When you just let the free market do its thing, it's unfolding perfectly, like according to that plan, right? Um, and so that's really, the sort of one of the things that surprised me in learning about all this was the fact that, so if this sort of really smart, honestly, invention, the way of sort of capturing this natural gas that's waste gas and putting it towards something in this world in which there is currently oil production happening, if we were to use those shipping containers and install them on existing production sites to minimize the impact for the remaining life cycle of that given oil production patch, that's one thing. But there's no, I'm hooking it up to mine Bitcoin is another thing. But in terms of complex computing operations, I see that as one thing that could make sense as an argument, right? So in this next 4 years of production in this given, where there's already leasing in the Permian, sure, that rig is already there. There's waste gas. Rather than burn it off, sure, let's use it for something. But there's no comprehensive policy to keep that in check and to sort of have that application wind down. And so what the real issue is here is that people such as Exxon entities such as Exxon, entities such as there's all kinds of other companies that are doing this now, right? That are jumping on board. The issue is that people are running away with this because it's monetizing something that perhaps should not be monetized.
Right. I mean, you bring up a great point, and I think that's really interesting. That the whole argument for why they would do partake in gas flaring is that they couldn't do anything. This was excess, but they're showing us with this that they could, if they wanted to, they could. Like, this could be going towards something that actually has a use case. It doesn't need to go towards a Bitcoin mining operation. That's just what they're choosing to spend the time, money, and effort into doing, because I guess the Bitcoin mining operation is maybe the most profitable for them. I don't know how much money Exxon is possibly making from this. They could just possibly just be doing it for the good PR, or the maybe it's a wash for them in terms of it costs nothing but doesn't they spend even less too, instead of gas flaring or whatever. But there's no reason why, if they've already come up with one way to divert this gas somewhere to avoid gas flaring, that they couldn't divert it somewhere where it would actually be of use.
Yeah, I mean, I think to like push back ever so slightly there, I think that at this point, like, the climate stuff is so serious that I think it's less a question of like they could be using it for something in the long term. And I think it's more of a question of like, is Bitcoin really necessary? I have all kinds of feelings about that. So do you. But I think it's less a question of like, okay, let's ship that off somewhere and now we got a plan. It's more like, oil production can't be happening anymore starting yesterday. And so like, sure, like you're saying, let's do something with it while that is still occurring. But it's not, I don't think it's a productive conversation either to be like, all right, we can do something with this also, like if we just bottle it up or, truck it to Austin or truck it to Atlanta.
Right.
I just want to be clear on that point. Like, I think that's a really important sort of element here that definitely is silenced in the Exxon announcement sort of narrative.
Right. We should. I think that's a great point. It should be mentioned that this conversation is a conversation that exists in, the sort of reality of the Exxon, and just really the reality of where we currently are in terms of, a greener future of renewables and such. Like, a lot of what we use is powered by this incredibly harmful to the environment sort of energy resources, and it is what it is right now. But the idea that this has to go towards Bitcoin mining or be flared is, they sort of blew it up by finding the Bitcoin mining to do something with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's their argument no longer makes sense for why they had to do gas flaring.
Totally. Another interesting thing on that note is just that, and just kind of thinking back to my conversations with a wide variety of climate experts, to ask what just kind of to collect opinions on this like pretty complex setup. One of the other really problematic things is that the concept of flaring itself is actually not that problematic itself, but it's actually kind of the perfect problem for the industry to pop in and be like, y'all, we got this. Because it's
because I was doing my research for it. The idea that gas flaring is like the worst thing imaginable was basically how you read these articles, and whether it's from Exxon or from these Bitcoin mining operations, they're like, oh man, this gas flaring is bad. We're like solving pretty much the whole crisis by taking care of the gas flaring issue. You're telling me that's not the case?
Yeah. So according to methane experts that I spoke with for this story, that is absolutely one of the most misleading elements here, right? Because like we're sort of talking about at the beginning earlier today, ultimately flaring is for safety, right? And so when you're flaring, you're burning methane and volatile organic compounds and other trace gases. And that combustion is creating carbon dioxide and water vapor, which are also greenhouse gases, right? So we got to take that into account, but they're less potent than methane in that sort of raw form. And so, the way that these flares are designed, they do their job more or less. And what really is the problem, according to experts I spoke with, such as Sharon Wilson, who's this fantastic woman who works for the Environmental Defense Fund, and she sits outside of these facilities, particularly in the Permian Basin, but all across the country, with an optical gas imaging camera. And so she's able to see what is invisible to the naked eye. So she can see like when actual, plumes of methane are coming out of these operations. And, her whole point is like, y'all, this is like, the issue is not the actual flaring. That's when the least, when that's being burnt, that's like, that's the least of our issues. What's really problematic in terms of climate impacts is accidental releases from those facilities, maintenance releases, things that are not a good photograph, but things that happen all the time when flaring is not occurring. But so, yeah, I mean, industry, oil and gas industry folks across the world really have sort of lapped that up. And as I mentioned before, just the pictures are really striking of flares, and it looks like it's like a sexy problem to be able to come in and say you can solve, because it looks really problematic. And it's not great that it's happening, but it's not the sort of, that's not the source of the issue. The issue is the actual drilling and production, not the flaring itself.
Wow, that's you wouldn't know that from the I guess really like the marketing that they put out here that was written up as a story by multiple outlets. What was the overwhelming, like, you said you spoke to a lot of experts. I'm assuming, can you actually just run down like just what type of experts you spoke with who would be knowledgeable about this sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. I spoke with about 10 experts, some of them are political scientists, some of them are like methane researchers, decades long methane researchers. Who else? Some folks that are sort of more on the tech side of things, so monitoring methane and sort of developing technologies to track methane emissions. And some folks that have been in this for a long time, right? So there's Dr. Robert Howarth from Cornell University. Put him in the piece, but he, sort of repeated what was sort of the foundational belief that I heard, or sort of opinion that I heard from these experts on all this stuff, which is just that, that it's sort of giving a lifeline to the fossil fuel industry. But yeah, so in addition to Dr. Robert Howarth, I spoke with all kinds of other folks. Dr. Greg Rick. Oh no, sorry, he didn't respond. I spoke with, just reading through my list here, Dr. Heather Price at North Seattle College, Dr. Pasha Madavi at UCSB in California. And again, these are folks that really know their science, they know their policy, and they fell down really clearly in favor of having it be known that this is, just another sort of greenwashing scheme that is really alluring.
Right.
And
what was
yeah.
What was their feeling more? I don't know if you asked them about this, if they shared this. But what was their feeling about Bitcoin mining? Without even like just as in general, like. Did they have any sort of opinion on just how bad that alone, without even bringing the oil and gas industry into it, how bad that was for the environment?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of people I spoke with kind of fall pretty clearly into the we do not need Bitcoin camp, and this is a waste of resources, period. And there's a lot of nuance also within people's feelings about that. But I would say by and large, that sort of was the sentiment of folks I spoke with. There were a couple people who wanted it to be known that, I have no opinion about Bitcoin. I'm not sort of like, I don't fall into the sort of polar responses. I just care about emissions and climate and curbing the climate crisis. And so even, from that standpoint also, they were like, well, so those folks would say more like, if you could power crypto in a perfect world on renewables, and we already had all the renewable energy that we needed to fuel our daily operations, that would be one thing. But we are so far from that, taking away segments of fleets of renewable fuels, renewable energy in whatever form is like a really pretty problematic concept.
Right. I'm really glad you brought up the renewable thing, because I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up in this conversation, depending on where we went with it. But you hear that's a great point, and I don't think I've ever heard any Bitcoin or crypto advocate address that in terms of, we're nowhere near renewable energy powering literally things we like, basic necessities, things we need to use every single day because life depends on it. Yet we're going to somehow divert those renewable resources to Bitcoin and crypto, because that's another thing they like to bring up. And I have some stats here too, that even though they like to say, we'll just power crypto and Bitcoin by using renewable resources, the percentage of renewables powering just the Bitcoin network were 17 percentage points lower last year than in the year before that. So they're actually moving away from it while they try to actually say they care more about this stuff. Another stat I saw, that Bitcoin actually got 50% less green in 2021 than it was in 2020. So again, that same dynamic that we're gonna renewable resource energy our way out of this, when the brilliant point made by everyone you spoke to, where that's like the last thing that should get renewable energy when we have like the renewable energy to spare for it. And then B, even when they do go about doing it themselves, clearly they've decided it's not worth it, whether it be from a money standpoint or just a maybe not enough energy standpoint to power what they need. I haven't quite gotten into why they did what they did last year, but they did it.
Yeah, I would love to throw in one more thing there, which is just one thing that really surprised me in learning about some of these models, and also in speaking to climate specialists, is that, so the one thing that surprised me, that intrigued a lot of the climate scientists and sort of methane researchers, was related to renewable energy, right? So one thing that Crusoe sort of explained to me that they also are working on is the idea of putting some of these shipping containers on site at remote wind fleets. So at sites where wind turbines are installed that are like far away from sort of cities or towns. And so like the grid is not, according to Crusoe, the grid, in places where the grid is not robust. And so another thing they're arguing, or they're sort of making the case for, is that they can help build more renewable fleets by essentially creating a source of demand for that energy. That, like, a lot of time when you're talking about renewable energy like wind, the supply is there's a lot more supply of energy than there is demand at different times of day, right? So there's some that is essentially wasted there too. So Crusoe is saying that they can do what they're doing with the flare gas operations on new renewable energy sites, and then underwrite new fleets by way of like being able to pay the renewable producer. And so that idea was compelling to a couple of these climate folks. But again, the sort of like the Crusoe point was, and not just Crusoe, but other people doing this too. So like if the grid goes down at a given moment, we can be there with our shipping container and all these little computers, and sort of like with our infrastructure to like help cities and towns if there's an outage, right? But short of again, climate policy or crypto policy that like would make that happen, what's going to actually happen when there's an issue and there's money to be made through mining, right? So yeah.
Right. And it comes back to that, there's a word that's just sticking with me that you mentioned that you heard from the various variety of experts you spoke with, and that is, the lifeline that this, new industry. I'm not going to say new technology because blockchain and crypto is not new, but the industry certainly is. This new industry is basically giving to, or possibly giving to, the oil and gas industry. How it seems like every expert you spoke with, that was like their number one concern, because here we are again, sort of moving away from this stuff, or trying to, and again, here comes crypto with all of its perceived riches, saying, "Hey, we're going to give you a way to keep your operations flowing."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also think it's notable that of the sort of 10 on the record climate experts I spoke with, there was 9 out of 10 said like, this is giving a lifeline, was the kind of their thesis, right? One person was a little more hesitant, and I know I mentioned this in the piece, but so she's a researcher that also has a side kind of hustle with developing these devices that monitor methane. And so, right, so the one person that's not concerned about it giving a lifeline to fossil fuel industry in various ways is, I think her no had to do, her sort of dissent had more to do with business interests than anything. So just figured I'd add that.
Right. Yeah. It's, I am so, as someone who covers this whole cryptocurrency world, and, I mostly focus on, the stuff that I know, the scams, the culture around it, the tech world space, infatuation with it, the political implications in terms of, the various different ideologies that go into this very libertarian space. The environmental stuff, I hate to say it, but and I'm sure people can tell listening to me now for 10 episodes, and they could probably tell that this is probably the episode where I knew the least about going into it. But this is clearly, it feels like it's easily the most important thing about it. There's no way we can, at the same time, continue to fight climate change and just let the cryptocurrency industry continue to legitimize itself. It seems like the two are incompatible. And if, and this is, I can't believe I've been saying this as someone who, again, if you've heard me for the past 10 episodes, how hard I've been on this whole space. If they could figure out something, that's on them though. Like, they need to figure this out, because otherwise their industry should die. Like, that's the same thing we say about oil and gas. These industries should not exist because of what the harm they're doing. Like, we can't live. Their profits and their money and their, and their power are not more important than like the life that on this planet.
Yeah. Amen. I think that, a political science professor, Dr. Madavi at UCSB, sort of said it. His kind of hit quote in my piece was just kind of summarized these sentiments. Right? He said that these operations are like if you had a leaky gasoline pipeline, and then instead of fixing the problem, you actually were to plug in a Humvee next to the leak and leave the engine on in perpetuity with the air conditioning on full blast. Yeah.
Wow. I think that's, I can't come up with a better analogy, honestly. I don't think I come up with a better one, even if I sat down and used the time to. That's pretty good. Man. I also can't believe that I just in this gave them a fantastical scenario where they'll actually figure this out, because I don't see it. I can't believe I even gave them the benefit of the doubt for that split second. But is there anything else that you think I missed covering this, because it is such and we just really focused on the most recent, the gas flaring issue. I on future episodes I need to dive further in with just basically what other ways that these mining operations are hurting the environment. It seems like I've seen some really ridiculous things, and I don't even want to get into it because then we got a whole nother episode now. Is there anything else that we missed about this?
I would just say, I mean, increasingly, there's so many ways to power, or there's so many ways that that companies are looking to power crypto mining operations, right? And I think that to me, some of the most sort of like fascinating and potentially problematic things we're seeing are this waste phenomenon, not even just waste gas, but sort of. I increasingly think of it as sort of like a bottom feeder, right? Like this capitalist catfish with a crown, like swimming around and looking for the cheapest energy sources, which often means, right, this flare gas. But also these same models are popping up all kinds of places all throughout the U.S. and the world. There's, like a waste coal model in Pennsylvania. There's like, there's people now doing the flare gas thing in Australia. Exxon is looking to expand, the waste gas flaring, Bitcoin flaring thing into Nigeria and Argentina and Germany. So, I mean, just lots to follow here. And I guess the most important thing to me is just like in terms of the merging of crypto and oil and gas is just that it's another sort of it is greenwashing in yet another form, and it allows them to try to look good, and they're essentially just monetizing something that is killing people and whole ecosystems.
Right. I mean, it fits with everything that I know about the crypto space. Everything is some sort of marketing ploy. I mean, at its core, it's a Ponzi. I've covered that on this show before, but we don't have to get into that here. But the greenwashing aspect is just another way where they're trying to sell you on something so they could pump and dump. I also thought it was real. For a second, when you said, I want to bring up some of the fascinating things I heard really quick about, other ways that, they were being discussed about powering mining facilities. And I really thought you were going to quickly name drop like a really like innovative new way that maybe could work. But instead, you just gave more ways why it's so horrible. So you threw me for a loop there for a second. I was like, oh, we're about to hear something positive, but no. They just can't do it, I guess. It's just not possible. Leanna First-Arai, this has been incredibly educational and incredibly depressing. So thank you.
That's all I do all day, every day is things that are educational and depressing. So yeah, no, thank you for having me, Matt. It's been really fun talking with you.
Where can people find your work? Where can they find you online? Feel free to name drop anything you'd like here, articles that just came out, upcoming projects, whatever. Go ahead. Let people know.
Yeah, for sure. So I have my work's at leannafirstarai.com. I mostly write right now for Truthout and The Guardian and other folks too. But yeah, that's where my work can be found. Mostly writing on climate and the environment. My Twitter handle is First-Arai, Firstarai. And that's all I got.
Thanks for joining me. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Damn, I cannot believe that Bitcoin mining is in fact not good for the environment. Who would have known? Who would have thunk it? Well, folks, we'll be getting into a lot more ways in how Bitcoin, crypto, NFTs, Web3, all of it isn't good for the environment, your wallet, society as a whole, and so much more. But for now, we're going to go to the Scam Economy Hotline Live post show so I can hear from all of you if you're watching live and we can discuss. So be sure to tune in if you're watching the live stream or catch the replay anytime at youtube.com/MattBinder and the audio only version on Patreon. And that Patreon link is patreon.com/MattBinder, where you can support this show and help it grow and really support everything I do, because along with Scam Economy, I do a political show called Doomed at doomedcast.com. Also, videos for that are also at youtube.com/MattBinder. But back to Scam Economy, where you can go to scameconomy.com and find all the links to where you can find this show as a podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is a big help in helping get this show higher up on the rankings so more people discover it. Like I've said before, I see a direct correlation between when we get a slew of new reviews and how many downloads we get. If you're watching the YouTube live stream or the hotline post show, you can drop a super chat and I'll read your comments, or go to twitch.tv/MattBinder. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you get a free Twitch Prime subscription each month. What does that mean? It means Amazon is giving you free money to give to your favorite Twitch streamer. Hopefully that's me. Go to twitch.tv/MattBinder after you connect your Amazon Prime account and your Twitch account, and you can basically extract a couple of bucks from Jeff Bezos' sofa and hand it over to me. It's a big help and a great way to support this show, especially if you're already paying for Amazon Prime. And before we go, I just want to thank all of you so much for your support. 10 episodes in and things are going, well, great for the show. Not going so great, I guess, for the scam economy.